Welcome to Almost Here, Round the Corner Future Technology podcasts with Richard Jacobs. Future technologies poised to transform our lives for better or worse are the focus of this podcast. Almost here means these technologies are now here and starting to be used, or just around the corner, from Bitcoin to artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, virtual reality, and more.
Hello, and welcome to the Future Tech Podcast. I'm Alan Thomas, and today I have with me Stewie Zhu, CEO of Distributed Credit Chain. How you doing, Stewie?
Good. Hi, Alan. Hi. It's a great pleasure to talk to you here.
Oh, no problem. Let's get right into it. What is Distributed Credit Chain, and what do you guys do?
So basically, distributed credit chain is the world's first distributed banking public blockchain. And we try to establish a more decentralized credit ecosystem for all those financial services providers around the world. So our mission is to transform different financial scenarios which required the credit data and realize the true inclusive finance. So the distributed bank is actually one word, not two words. It's more like an ecosystem that connects all those financial services providers in a P2P platform. And we actually produce a new type of decentralized credit transporting and telecom network for transferring all this financial credit data. Yeah.
And why is it important to have a decentralized network for this data?
They got big problems with the centralized financial system. I was studying finance as a PhD student in London School of Economics, and before that, I was studying at Yale. It was like 2008. So when I graduated there, I was unemployed. So this year is the 10th anniversary of this financial credit crisis, and I started a lot of theories about those credit crises, something like how do we prevent next one, and we don't get an answer until I met the blockchain as a technology. So I think this technology they sort of provide an ultimate solution to that problem. So that's one of the reasons for us to start to produce this decentralized credit ecosystem. So our ultimate goal is to solve some older problems in the credit area in our more centralized financial system, such as like high transaction costs and very high interest rate in some part of this world, as well as protect our data privacy. And in which here what I mean the data is the financial credit data. Yeah.
So the 2008 financial crisis is kind of what inspired you to go forward and end up founding the company, right?
Yeah. I dropped my PhD study at the third year, and I returned my home country as a serial entrepreneur. So the area I was working in is in fintech. Yeah, at that time it was called the internet finance or something. So like my company was doing providing the software as a services for all those micro lending platforms in China. And at that time, the market of those online micro-lending, small cash loans, unsecured loans, it grows very fast. It produced over 5 companies which are listed in NASDAQ and as well as NYSE now. And the total outstanding debt of those online micro debts, they grows from almost zero to 19 trillion Chinese yuan annually. So within only 4 years. So at that time, my company was doing well. So, but I sold the company at 2017, which is last year, and I think I had the industrial experiences that I know how those micro lending platforms, how do they work, within the industry. So I saw the problems, and the problems such as like they charge a very high interest rate for the customers. For example, in countries, in some countries in Asia, like China and Korea and Indonesia, which have the huge population base, the shadow banking system, they charge very high interest rate. It could be as high as 200 or 300% annually. So it produces problems, a lot of problems. Like not only like privacy problems, data leaking problems. They have like even more or social welfare problems. So I was always thinking that because is there any method that we can produce a more adapted mechanism so that we can decrease all this cost of those micro lending platforms, decrease the cost for the financial institutions who provide those channeling services, who decreasing cost for the infrastructure companies, so that we would produce a credit product with low transaction cost as well as low interest rate as well as the low default rate. Yeah, and I think with blockchain technology, we probably have an answer. Yeah.
And if we could just step back for a second and talk about the shadow banking system that you mentioned, let's just go into a little bit of detail about what that is, just to make sure everybody kind of knows what that is.
Oh yeah. So okay. So the shadow banking system, I mean, is like here I refer to those unsecured loans and those like credit business providing by those internet companies. Because in Asia, it's like, for example, like in my country, the centralized financial institutions, like those licensed financial institutions, like banks or trust companies, they are like highly regulated, and they are, I would say, they are safe, but they're like sort of like slow, and a lot of services are uncovered. Especially under such a big number of population base. So those internet companies, they come from I would say since 2014. They actually serve like a lot of people. They have a very high active daily user base, and so most of them, they're sort of like unlicensed, but they have huge number of user base. So they produce, big amount of like outstanding debt for those, unserved people, and they lead to a big market of those unsecured debts. So here is what I refer to the shadow banking system in mainland China.
And for the distributed credit chain for your company, are you dealing directly with consumers or companies or both?
We deal with both. So first of all, we try to provide a new a network for transporting all this credit data. So we provide this DCCID to the licensed financial institutions like banks, as well as those internet companies I mentioned earlier, like those micro lending companies or P2P firms. So we have the institutional customers, and we also develop our own applications on our platform. We build up our own D apps. So in those D apps, it could be the cryptocurrency lending D app. So in that case, we're facing to the customers directly.
And for those folks who would want to get involved with your company, with your service, what is that like when they come to you on that first day, when they go to your website or fill out the form, or how do they get set up? How does that work?
Okay, so it's a bit different if you considering if you're an institutional user or you're an individual user. So for institutions, like they would somehow transferring the credit data in a more centralized way. So it will be like each institution, they will play a role as a data island. They will collecting those credit data from everywhere, and they will spend a lot of like efforts or money to buy the redundant data and save it without returning the ownership of those data to the individual. So that is a problem. So in our case, like we actually return the ownership of the data to individuals. So when the institutions, they're applying or they're using our DCC ID to transferring the credit data, they're actually transferring the hash summaries. So every data is saved either locally or in the cloud, and they were using a new forms of telecom network for credit data. So the institutions, they would keep their efficiency of doing this credit business, but what I mean is that if the efficiency will not be affected. At the same time, all the data, they're not saved within those financial institutions. So they belong to all these customers. So at the same time, when an individual directly apply this network, for example, like they want to borrow or lend cryptocurrencies in our own DApp. So it would be like a very simple example would be an individual would send a request to a data rating credit agency for his credit report. And then the credit rating agency will send his report and with a hash summary saved in the DCC network. And at the same time, DCC network will send a verification request to these credit rating agencies. And if it is verified, so this DCC ID would be labeled as authenticated. If there's more and more lending activities, so this DCC ID will upgrade continuously. It just acts as a traditional membership in traditional banks. But at this time, you own your data, and you can circulate this on your own willingness, and no one's going to touch it. So it's a completely new form of credit data transferring network. Yeah, and it is decentralized.
And so let's talk about the network a little, because as you've built up DCC and built out your network, what kind of challenges have you had in building out the network?
Oh yeah, you asked a great question. Because like those traditional centralized financial institutions, they trade those data as very valuable assets. Especially those internet companies, like big internet companies in Asia, like most of them, they are all providing the financial services. So they own those financial data, and they don't want to share it, especially with their opponents. So in this case, like those data, it's very hard to convince them to apply a new form of credit data sharing network. So we don't do it that way. And we saw a lot of examples of pull out 10 biggest banks to form a league and blockchainize it, or to found like one big national bank or one internet company, and we form another league to produce another something like a blockchain-based service platform, and all these new financial services would be based on this platform. This is also not going to work because there's too much things called the conflict of interest between those big players. So what we choose to develop this decentralized credit ecosystem from the very beginning, or you can say from zero, and we grow it up. So it's like running an internet company. There will be a lot of like difficulties of like how do we gain users, how do we talk to those what we call the last generation of internet micro lending platforms to apply a new system of credit data transferring system. Yeah. So that is a lot of difficulties for us to do as like a business development work, as well as the ecosystem development work. Yeah, but I think we will do it because we have a lot of experiences within the industry, and we are trying to transform our older clients or older business clients to applying this new credit sharing network, and they're highly interested because they realize that it is a more safe and a more fast way, and the individual users, they also like it because there are more and more D-apps in the market, and they show the value of their data in terms of giving their data back to the users, so the users can probably sell this data for the real cash. So the users are more and more used to trade their own data, which is generated from the interactions between they and the online world. They will treat it as an asset. So if that habit, is formed, and it would be more easier for us to gain customers directly. Yeah.
And so we talked about some of the challenges of building out the network, but what are some of the big achievements that you would think that comes to mind so far since you've had the network up and running?
Yeah, the achievement would be it is a brand new way of transferring the credit data. Or you can say it is an opportunity to reshape the existing centralized credit system. So, well, there's a lot of challenge, but I think the blockchain offers us an opportunity to do something that we cannot do in the past, I would say, 80 or 100, almost 100 years since all those financial credit crises happens since 1929 to 2008. So the blockchain technology actually provide a solution. So it's not like a policy-oriented solution. So I would say it would affect a lot of things, and we want to catch up this opportunity. And I will not say now we had a lot of achievement. We had a solution, but I want to make that solution to be an achievement if we can really work it out. Yeah.
And as you've been building out the network and you've got it up and running, has there been any ideas, or has anybody asked for any features of it that you say, well, it might be too soon to do that, or technology, we may not be able to do that yet, something like that?
Oh, yeah, of course, because the development of all the main chains, it goes really slow. You can see a lot of main chain projects. They have crazy market cap in terms of the token values, but not a lot of them they're applicable. So if you want a more applied main chain, for my understanding, you need to have more. You would come with more professional experiences within the industry. So, here, the challenge would be we are not trying to develop a very general chain. So we are trying to focusing on one specific industry, which is the credit industry. So the chain is designed specifically for solving the credit problem. And in this case, we're more focused. So when people making comments about the blockchains, they would always say, okay, the public chain or the main chain, there's a lot of challenges. Yes, they are right. But for us, we do not want to provide a very general product. We only want to focusing on one problem, which is a credit problem, because there were so much problems within the credit industry, as I mentioned earlier, brought by those traditional financial institutions. Yeah.
And so what do you think the next 12 to 24 months will look like for the DCC?
Okay, so we actually launched our first D app in March, and this month we launched our second D app. So we are talking to more and more strategic partners in our industry. And as you might know, the credit business line is very long. If you do it online, the online credit business, it evolves like companies like those online traffic directing companies, as well as financial institutions like banks who provide capital, infrastructure companies like the third-party payment companies, or the what we call the credit reconstruction companies, like those companies who are doing the ABS evaluation. So yeah, and as well as those startups or those AI-based startups who's doing the risk control techniques. So we are talking to all those different business partners to join our DCC ecosystem. So because every one of those companies, they need to deal with the credit data. So they have to transport the credit data using our network. So now we are talking to those different players within our industry across all different countries. We have strategic partners in Vietnam as well as Indonesia. Now I'm in Korea and I'm talking to the local P2P lending companies. We're in the next 6 months we are focusing not only in East Asia but also in South America, in countries like Brazil. So the next 6 months we will focusing on the globalization and to develop our community by talking to those various strategic partners across the world.
And so what's the best reason for people to come to DCC and start using the network?
Okay, great question. So in this brand new way, in a blockchainized world, you definitely get your data back, and you can, in extreme cases, you can sell it if you want. So it gives you more degrees of freedom when you're dealing with your own data. The secondly is very safe. So the blockchain technology itself, it actually proves that. So I would not talk a lot about it here. The third way is like for the whole system, it decreases the cost. So normally, like an easy example to illustrating that would be why the interest rate is so high in certain parts of the world. Why in some countries the shadow banking market, they have interest rate as high as 300% annually. It's because people don't pay back or they don't have the money to pay such a high interest rate. The default rate is very high. So the super high interest rate is being charged to redeem this default risk. So by solving this problem, we cannot just provide a simple cryptocurrency borrowing and lending D app to solve that problem. It will not solve anything. You're going to touch the core part of the whole credit system. The credit transporting mechanism need to be changed. Once we change it, all the problems will disappear. The cost will going down. The default rate will going down. They have a lot of theoretical work of mechanism designs behind it, but I think that is the main goal we want to achieve, and it is the meaning of develop a decentralized credit chain. Yeah.
Okay, and what's the best way for people to get in touch with you and the network and the company and to find out more information and to get involved?
So we have our own exploit. It's just like Israel scan. You can track the progress of the all these DCC tokens as well as our project. And we announced, we opened our code at GitHub, so the fans of DCC project, they can check it. And the D app we launched in March, it has over 30 grand downloads, with about 3,000 people actually doing those lending activities. And now we had the second app called the Beat Express, and it's a cryptocurrency lending app. So if people are interested, they can download it from the Android store. And we have a mature product. I mean, those mature products, as I mentioned earlier, for people that can directly use it. So it's not like some main chain like always under development. So when people can find us in a lot of places, and as well as our product, and if they found it interesting, if they wanted to try, they can just download it and use it. And we also do a lot of new ways of marketing, because the traditional way of internet traffic is too expensive. It's way too expensive, especially in countries like China. So, for example, our P2P lending platforms could spend over $100 to gain a new active customer, while in this crypto world, in the blockchain world, it would only cost maybe some candies, or you can say for example, your own tokens. So in this case, the users would be more interested, and the cost of gaining new users, they are way much more cheaper compared to the traditional internet world. So they got a lot of different ways to attract new users. So that is what we do basically.
Okay, well, I want to thank you, Stewie, for coming onto the podcast and sharing your knowledge and your time with us.
Yeah, thank you, and I hope I explained something. Because the problem we're trying to solve is a relatively big problem. You can see very successful blockchain projects, applications in finance, such as Ripple Network. It solves the foreign exchange problems, and we're actually trying to deal with a bigger problem, which is credit. So we want more attentions, from everywhere in the world, and we want to attract the best talented people to help us.
Okay, great. And like I said, I just want to thank you for being on here and sharing all this knowledge with us. Thanks for coming on.
Okay, thank you very much, my friend.
You have been listening to Almost Here, Around the Corner Future Technology podcast with Richard Jacobs. Subscribe to this podcast, post a review to discover more future technologies that are poised to transform our lives for better or worse, such as Bitcoin, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, virtual reality, and more.